Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 28th of July 2025. Downward turn, not feeling particularly good today, so I apologise if my brain is a bit befuddled. We have the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply, of course. You can find them linked in the description below. 1,000 personnel lost, that's hitting the kind of arbitrary threshold of 1,000 there. 4 tanks and 1 troop-carrying AFE. That's obviously, you know, a case of very low numbers in those categories, and 4 artillery systems is the lowest I've seen in artillery systems for goodness knows how long. 1 multiple launch rocket system, and 103 vehicles and fuel tanks. So definitely looks like a quieter day on the front line, even though we know places like Pokrovsk, Sumy, they are still very hot. But, well, you know, personnel losses are still fairly significant. It's just equipment losses are not. We can derive, I guess, a number of conclusions from that. Interesting analysis here from Tatarigami, well, not from him, but talking about the Ukrainian journalist Yuri Butasov. We've heard from him previously. He's a very honest journalist. He said that since the 3rd Brigade was reorganized into a corps, so there's been this big reorganization of the Ukrainian forces into a corps structure, losses of units, he says, have dropped by half, even as combat intensity has grown. He credits the change to increased trust in leadership, better tactics, organisation and reporting. So it looks like there really has been a, I don't know if professionalisation is the right word, but an improvement in the organisation of the armed forces and arguably a better decision-making landscape there. Playfra says, effective leadership reforms, one of the biggest problems in the Ukrainian army now. I sincerely hope this solution will be scaled up as soon as possible. That's really good news in terms of the effectiveness of these units and, of course, looking after their most valuable asset, the human resource. We hear from Brovdi himself, Magyar, that there was an attempt on his life and on the lives of many top drone commanders. So this is 414 Magyar's Birds. Their Twitter handle, well worth following, says, the commander of Ukrainian Unmanned Systems Forces, Magyar, posted a photo on his Telegram channel with the commanders of 5 units from the drone line. Here's a direct quote from Brovdi, and he's typically, he has a unique way of communicating, shall I say that. So, worms, it's time to get moist. Every 4th Yoblik and 1 in 3 confirmed enemy targets this summer were taken out by Cossacks of the drone line, part of the newly formed Unmanned Systems Task Force. Commanders, Zemlyak Phoenix, Krylovich, K2, Klima, Magyar's Birds, Hassan, Raro, Achilles from Achilles. Briefing, debrief, planning. Pig Dogs, we saw your little stunt yesterday. So this is where he's talking about the Russians to the Russians. Pig Dogs, we saw your little stunt yesterday, trying to poke all of us at once. Nice try. Go suck your bambucello. Every second worm, get your assholes ready for autumn. Just the way you like it, rat effers. I and the sting are worm's worst nightmare. Eyes and the sting. So, in other words, I presume eyes being the drones and the sting, and then hitting the Russians' worst nightmare. So typically rhetorically unique, but it appears that he is admitting, and lots of people are talking about this, that the Russians probably got wind of a meeting between him and all of these commanders and then tried to take them out. There was some attempt. We don't really have any details, but it was unsuccessful, at least as far as Magyar is claiming there. So that is good news that he lives to fight another day. I mean, he's, goodness me, one of the most important people in the Ukrainian armed forces at the moment. If they are taking out 1 in 3 pieces of equipment and 1 in 3 people in terms of Russian casualties, then my goodness, these drone units are doing a vital thing. So, vital job here, and long may that continue. Well, actually, short may that continue. May this war be as short as possible, and the Ukrainians prevail as quickly as possible. But let's face it, that's unlikely to be the case. Right, Andrew Perpetua has a loss list this time for the 26th, though back to 2 days in arrears, or a day in arrears, really. We have about the same losses each side, but better for the Ukrainians today. So most of their losses are comms equipment, and that's, that is not too bad. I've talked about this a number of times recently. These are not majorly high value bits of equipment. When you're talking about combat assets, relatively few pieces of kit there, although not too different from the Russians. The Russians are losing today more civilian equipment and ATVs, which is fairly typical. We'll look at the Ukrainian list first, and we do have a lot of surveillance and comms equipment. There is a Su-27UB. Arsonists possible that the plane couldn't even fly to begin with. I've not heard of this. So this is a Su-27UB. I think that's on the wrong list, because the Su-27UB was a plane that was burnt down in Russia at the training facility. So I think that's accidentally been put on the wrong list there by Andrew. Let's just see if he's mentions that in his comments. Atesh action against the Russians. Yeah, exactly. So I think he's got that one wrong. But nonetheless, we'll look at the rest of the stats. So let's ignore that, which is good. In fact, let's put that on the Russian side, and that's going to make matters worse for them. We have a couple of UGVs, pretty normal. Artillery, we've got a Bogdana 2S22. So like I said, I've said a number of times, you're going to see more of them. Then you've got TRF1. I'm wondering, that's not the Turkish. No, TRF1, these are howitzers. I wonder where they got them from. French. French government sends Ukraine TR. Yep, so those are towed howitzers that have come from France. Oh, I've not seen them before. Not seen them on any list. Not knowledgeable about those. Anyway, one of those is damage. You can see the Vandal drones there doing an awful lot of heavy lifting for the Russians. We've got Lancets as well thrown in, and obviously FPVs. We've got 3 tanks there, 1 track garden shed for the Ukrainians. We've got 3 infantry fighting vehicles, and it's good that most of what you see is damaged and not destroyed. MRAPs, there's quite a few of those, which is fairly normal. Infantry mobility vehicles, a couple, and then onto 3 ATVs, 3 quads there, and the rest in civilian vehicles, just over 50-50. Just over 50% destroyed there by the looks of it. Okay, so that's not too bad for the Ukrainians. When it comes to the Russians, let's assume that plane is actually a Russian plane, so that's going to make matters worse for the Russians. We've got a radar system, unknown, no, so that could be a major one, might not be. Recovery vehicle on there. Then in the artillery section, we have a TOS-1A. That's a thermobaric launcher. It's good news to see them taken out. About 50% of this equipment is destroyed in the artillery section. That's better than normal. Usually it's damaged because it's quite difficult to work out, often how much damage is done to a particular towed howitzer. We've got some D30s on there, some Mr. Bs, and then a number of tanks, half a dozen tanks there. None of those track garden sheds, so that's interesting. All tanks being used as tanks, but 4 of them unknown varieties, a couple of the others T-72s. IFVs, 2 destroyed infantry fighting vehicles, and a couple of infantry mobility vehicles, a few trucks there, and then we're on to ATVs, all-terrain vehicles, a lot of quads, motorcycles, a couple of buggies, golf buggies and whatnot. So a lot of ATVs there, and quite a few civilian vehicles, most of them destroyed too. So the Ukrainians having, I think, a better day of it. Today, it's been swings and roundabouts recently, been fairly equal. All things considered, apart from when you've got those big hauls of huge radar systems that are very, very costly, and they are significant bits of kit. Okay, so new data from the Kiev School of Economics indicates that the Russians have significantly had their vast Soviet-era weaponry stockpiles depleted since the full-scale invasion began, causing the flow of military goods to the front lines to revert to pre-2022 levels. This is what we have, I think, been witnessing through the data that we've been looking at So this should come as no surprise to anyone. Let's look at some of the claims. According to the KSE Institute's findings, shipments originating near Russia's primary storage fields are projected to fall from a peak of 242,000 tons in 2022 to 119,000 tons in 2025. So under half of what was being transported previously. Quote, Russia is now sending less material for refurbishment and repair than we know the repair stations can handle. Wow. The better quality and easily restored equipment would have been the first to be moved. So what that means is they've got less stuff going to the refurbishment facilities to start with. And then each item that goes will take longer to fix and will be more expensive to fix because they're sending the really shitty stuff now. So they send these husks of vehicles. Takes a long time. They've got excess capacity and they are sending fewer and fewer bits of kit to the front lines. The better quality and easily restored equipment would have been the first to be moved, said Pavlo Shkurenko, an analyst at the KSE Institute, speaking to the FT. Since 2022, Russia has actively sought to refit mothballed equipment for deployment to the front lines. This includes a large number of T-72 and T-80 tanks originally produced in the 1970s, which have been observed in Ukraine. Even some T-54 tanks have been, which began production in the late 1940s, have reportedly seen combat. Some military analysts, however, advise against interpreting that reduced frontline deliveries of armoured vehicles as a definitive sign that Russian forces are losing combat effectiveness. According to FT, these experts point out that Russia's battlefield tactics have adapted to employ fewer such vehicles, and additionally they observe that the Russian armed forces are also spending heavily to build up new stocks. Okay, two things going on there. So the first thing is definitely true, that they have adapted to the tactics of the Ukrainian drone operators, and they are using quads and motorcycles and buggies to do a lot of attacks, and even SUVs and whatnot. And I think they can still gain as much territory using those tactics really as they were when they were using. In fact, they're probably arguably gaining more territory right now, or have been over certain months of this year, than they were when they had way more equipment. So, be very wary about this idea of no combat assets, or no vast numbers of materiel, meaning that they would be losing combat effectiveness. Now, then the question is, are they building up new stocks? That's the question. What are the manufacturing numbers of new tanks and infantry fighting vehicles and APCs? And what are they doing with them? Are they sending them to the front line? Are they stockpiling them, as many people or some people are speculating? And why would they be doing that? KSE analysis also points to Russia's increasing reliance on Asian allies as its domestic resources have dwindled. Russia's defense industry now depends on supplies from China, while its military receives the majority of ammunition from North Korea. By weight, approximately 52% of shipments labelled as explosive materials to Russia's arsenals in 2024 originated from Nakhotka, a port region in the Sea of Japan used by North Korea. Shipments from this area surged from zero prior to the war to 250,000 tons by 2024. Effectively, where the Russians are not producing equipment, particularly in terms of ammunition, the North Koreans are. And they are shipping, or they may not be producing them, but they are shipping their stockpiles of ammunition, certainly, and also self-propelled guns, howitzers, etc. Multiple launch rocket systems too. Now, Anton Gerashenko says Russians have attacked a bus with Ukrainian civilians in Sumy region from a drone. By preliminary information, 3 people were killed and 20 more were injured. Ladies were aged 78, 74 and 68. They were the ones who died. Really sad there, and I think it shows that the Russians are just trying to make life hell for those living in Sumy. Horrific scenes there. And yeah, if we can't have it, you can't have it either. It's kind of their approach to Kherson. I think they're going to do the same to Sumy and Kharkiv. So what else do we have? Freedom of Russia Legion. They've been operating down in the Aeroflot direction. That's on the southern front line of Zaporizhia for the last 6 months. It was hot. Of all the directions, this is where the enemy's manpower is the largest. So there are claims that the Russians are really heating up down on the southern front in Zaporizhia. So something to watch out for there. what else do we have? So for the first time, I actually meant to show this yesterday, but I didn't get the link up correctly. For the first time, Ukrainian FPV interceptors appeared to have successfully downed a Russian Orlan medium altitude long endurance drone. So these, sorry, Orion, not Orlan. So very different. The Orions are like the basically MQ-9 Reaper drones. They are very long range drones that are a lot more expensive than, say, an Orlan. And this is the first time, apparently, that we've seen an Orion downed by a Ukrainian interceptor. And of course, taking this down means that this will not be able to do reconnaissance for the Russians so that they can target high value equipment or troop accumulations and whatnot. It's really important to take these reconnaissance drones out. Really, really is. Even if you're using more expensive missiles against such drones, it is the opportunity cost of not shooting them down that you need to quantify. So take, for example, here we've got a montage of interceptors taking out, in this case, 5 Garand drones down by the Garpun unit using these Ukrainian interceptor drones. But what's worth noting here is that each of these drones are going to be doing a job. Like, taking these down doesn't mean that these have failed in their job, these reconnaissance drones. Look at what they're looking at. You are seeing in this footage, as Playfar says, Russian Gerbers flying over Dobropilya, Rodinsky direction. Ukrainian fortifications are well visible, especially anti-tank ditches. They are mapping out what the Ukrainians have in terms of defenses, what material might be worth targeting. Even if they lose them like this, they can still be successful. I was discussing with you guys some time back a Tochny analysis of these drones, where they're saying actually reconnaissance drones are now deemed as one-way drones. You send them up expecting them not to come back. So a drone like this, you send it up, it goes and maps out, and then you're going to lose it. It's going to get taken down. Probably particularly these Gerber drones. I don't think I'm unsure, like some, when you hear of, we're going to talk about this in a second, Russia sending in 250 drones into Ukraine, not all of them are going to be loaded with warheads. Some of them will be outright decoys, others reconnaissance. I don't know whether they can be reconnaissance and warhead drones. I presume they can be. And we have been hearing that they've been loading up more recently, some of the reconnaissance drones with warheads. So, yeah. I guess we kind of have to do a lot of speculation when we look at the figures. Just to give you a sense of what's going on in Pokrovsk, volunteers evacuate civilians from Pokrovsk under fire. On July the 13th, during 2 rescue missions, they managed to evacuate 12 people, including 2 injured and 2 dogs. There are still going to be people hanging out in Pokrovsk and the surrounding area, even though it's in the middle of being stormed. That's what happened in Bakhmut, if you remember. Their work is extremely challenging and dangerous, but they keep doing it, and hats off to them for this incredible work that they often do.
Давайте, родники, вы на машине будете ехать за нами? Да, да. Давай быстрее, давай, отец. А машиной можно? Вот он на машине будет ехать. Да, можно машиной! Он пидорская хуйня летит. Люди, если вы не поторопитесь, мы все тут останемся.
It would be horrible to be in that situation where you're always listening out for sounds in the sky to see what's there and what may be going for you. You're always going to be paranoid that whatever you can hear is aiming for you. It must be horrible. So hats off to people who go out of their way to help civilians in these situations. Right, we're going to move on to distance munitions, and you can see that the Russians were very busy overnight, targeting primarily one place. And that would be Starokon in Khmelnytsky Oblast. This is the airbase where they traditionally had the planes that would fire the Storm Shadow missiles, cruise missiles. It's been targeted right throughout the war, Starokon, and it does have, I think, some of the best Ukrainian air defense there. So Patriot, I'm positive there's a Patriot there, and they will be trying to take down all the drones and ballistic missiles that are sent so frequently at Starokon. I think it's where the F-16s are likely at, possibly the Mirage as well. So the Russians are going to be, and do frequently, target Starokon, and as you can see, virtually everything was thrown at it last night. A few drones over in the northwest of Ukraine. We're going to talk in a second about how the Polish scrambled their air force to possibly ward off some errant drones, and also we hear that as you can see, one seems to go up here into Belarus, but it might have come directly from Belarus. There was a Gerber drone over Lithuania, but we'll come to that in a second. Right. Okay, so 324 Shahed drones. That's a big number of drones, right? But it's not what we have seen. I talked about this a little bit yesterday. I'm trying to work out whether there is some issue with the production of drones, because we were starting to expect sort of 500 nightly, and that hasn't been the case. They still have to stockpile. And actually, we haven't seen one of these massive 500, 700 drone attacks for a wee while. But 324 is still significant. 309 of them taken out. So that's really impressive. I wonder whether, I'm sure it is the case that Ukrainian interceptor drones are really playing an important part in this increased interception rate that we are seeing. Of course, it depends where they fire these. If they fire them close to the front line, interceptor drones don't have the time to be able to be used against them. So it does depend where those drones are aiming at. 2 out of 4 cruise missiles were shot down, and none of the 3 Kinjal the Kinjal hypersonic ballistic missiles were shot down. So that they were aimed at Starokon. Whether they hit their desired targets is another question. They're not always the most accurate, but they're very hard to shoot down. And if you're not sure what happened, and the Ukrainians are not going to be forthcoming due to OPSEC with the details of what was struck or wasn't struck at Starokon. So we're left just hoping that they didn't hit anything significant. And there's no doubt the Ukrainians would have scrambled their planes, but it's the infrastructure around those planes that's important. And sometimes you can't get all the planes up in the air. So as Tim White says, 3 Kinjal missiles have stopped flying. The danger is over, so this was at the time. All went to Starokon in Khmelnytsky. Russia attacked the airfield there with almost all it had, various missiles and a load of drones. The base is well protected. Let's hope they stopped everything. And then No Report says Poland once again scrambled fighter jets overnight due to Russia's mass attack on Ukraine. According to the Polish Armed Forces Operational Command, air defense and radar systems were placed on high alert. Measures were taken to ensure security in regions bordering threat zones. We also hear, as referenced, a drone likely launched from Belarus was spotted in Lithuanian airspace, this time near Vilnius, according to LRT. While its type hasn't been confirmed, its sound and appearance do resemble the Russian Gerber drone. That's the one that we just saw in that montage that had 5 of them taken out, often used to mimic Shahed drones. Wow. I mean, if that was intentional, that's going over NATO territory. If it's not intentional, how can it be so far off course? Now, for the Ukrainians, they supposedly attacked a number of places last night. We've heard virtually nothing on this, so I'm interested as to what's happened. Breaking, says Vision at the time, so this is sort of 11 o'clock, 11:20, I think, Ukrainian time. At this moment, Ukrainian kamikaze drones are carrying out a massive attack on Russian territory, targeting the regions of Belgorod, Kursk, Lipetsk, Tula, Rostov, Krasnodar, as well as the Crimean direction in several cities. Air raid sirens have been activated and explosions can be heard. But I've heard nothing other than an explosion. I don't even know where this is. Ukrainian drones once again active over Russian territory. Have no idea where, but something exploded somewhere. But there's no wide-scale BDA, battle damage assessment, coming from the sources. Let's see if there's anything that's come out recently this morning. No, it doesn't look like it. A lot of talk about what we'll discuss in a second. Aeroflot. No. Okay, so nothing there. Right, we're just going to go back to what happened 2 nights ago. So this is concerning the attack in Volgograd on some railway infrastructure. The original claim was another Ukrainian drone strike inside Russia, likely targeting a railway traction substation in the Volgograd region. The strike caused a visible fire. Some reports mentioned a nearby oil refinery, but our analysis points to the substation. And I showed you an explosion at what looked like a substation, because there's then a massive white flash, which usually suggests it was an electrical explosion that went off after the initial kind of drone explosion, and then fire was there. And I think what you see on the right is a substation as opposed to an oil refinery. And then there's a bit more detail about the hit on the rail. So that substation would supply the trains on this network with their electricity. So it's really important, stops the trains, at least those trains. Additional visual evidence, says Tatarigami, indicates that strikes damaged not only the substation, but also the building adjacent to the main railway station. The fire appears to have completely gutted that building, which likely housed signal control equipment. And that means that the Russian trains are going to be, whether diesel or electric, if you don't have signals, you're not going to be able to operate safely or at all even. So could have been a useful strike there, hurting Russian logistics. Right, we're moving on to other bits and pieces. So this is what I referenced a second ago, the Aeroflot system. That's the national airline for the Russians. There's been a collapse in the airports, in the Russian airports again. This time it's due to the failure of the Aeroflot system. So last time it's due to drone attacks. So when they have what's called the carpet plan, they shut down airports, and that causes massive issues. More than 500 flights were cancelled last time. The problem affected almost 75,000 passengers. But this time it's different, and it's different in a significant way. So this is a long-term issue for Aeroflot. Hackers have reportedly destroyed the entire IT infrastructure of Russia's Aeroflot in a year long. So this is a long time in the making and planning, and the operation, a year-long cyber operation. All critical systems, all of them, from databases to internal mail and executive communications, were breached. Around 7,000 servers were wiped and over 20 terabytes of data stolen. I mean, that could screw Aeroflot going forward for some time, some considerable time. Wow. So good stuff there from the Ukrainians. Will have a serious effect on Russia's aviation industry. Now, I didn't report this the other day because I thought, it's not that important. It looked like Kadyrov, who's not very well, hasn't been very well for some time, almost drowned while on holiday. And I was like, okay, whatever. Sometimes I make obviously a bad judgment on what I should or shouldn't include. And actually it was more significant than possibly, certainly than I thought. So I thought it was just a holiday incident. So he's on holiday in Bodrum in Turkey. Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov, so remember, hero of Chechnya, that he awarded himself, that made me, it prompted me to give myself the Legend of the Multiverse, and it's why I'm clearly the Legend of the Multiverse. No one can take that away from me. Why? Because I made up that award myself, and I awarded it myself. I awarded it to me. You can't do anything about that. I'm sorry. I am the Legend of the Multiverse. Because that's what great warlords do, right? And I am a great warlord. Here, Ramzan Kadyrov gave himself a hero of Chechnya. He made the award and gave it to himself. And next year, he gave it to his son, who was 16 at the time, I think. There you go, Adam. You're the hero of Chechnya this year. Anyway, I digress. Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov's recent near drowning in Bodrum is reportedly suspected to have been a suicide attempt. He's said to have slipped away from his bodyguards and entered the sea in a presumed one-way trip, but was saved by beach lifeguards. The Telegram channel that Chris Owicki refers to reports on rumours around the incident, which took place on July the 24th at the Turkish resort of Bodrum. According to local media, according to the channel, Kadyrov was alone on the beach at the time. The guards on the beach helped him, called an ambulance, and Kadyrov was taken to a private hospital. One of the TV channels showed Kadyrov's motorcade and an ambulance leaving the hospital grounds. A source noted that it was not his numerous guards who saved Kadyrov, but strangers. According to the source, quote, nobody thought that he would go anywhere at all, let alone to the beach, and the guards blinked. He was alone in the water, and apparently this is not accidental. According to prevailing version, Kadyrov was not going to return from the sea, but his plans were interfered with by the beach security. End quote. The source says that the recent reports about Kadyrov's alleged will supported this version of events. It claimed that Kadyrov has asked for his ally, Adam Delimkanov, to rule Chechnya until his own son, Adam, currently 17, is old enough to take over. Kadyrov is widely reported to be seriously ill. According to the Telegram channel, he, quote, may recently be experiencing serious pain. He requires strong substances. He moves with difficulty and so almost never appears in public, end quote. He was shown on camera in several videos made on the eve of his departure to Bodrum, the first one that we'll look at in a second. He clearly looks unwell. He is not shown in close up and he says little or nothing. Actually, when you look at this video, he is not a well man. I mean, music aside, he is hardly moving. His mobility is definitely screwed. He hardly says anything. He's not looking happy and he looks ill. He looks wan and, not a well man. So I have reported previously that he was reported dead. He disappeared for a long time, and it turns out that he was in some kind of respite health rehabilitation center or something. His mobility was absolutely screwed. His speech was screwed. Remember, we used to have PR videos of him running around with guns like some alpha male. That's not the case anymore. So it's certainly the case. I think he's very close to death. I think he's reported to have, is it liver or kidney issues? He killed his doctor, if you remember, some time back, and buried him. Yeah. Anyway, that's Ramzan Kadyrov. So the IOC, International Olympic Committee, is considering allowing athletes from Russia and Belarus to compete in the 2026 Olympics in Italy. Commission chair has said that a final decision has not been made. There needs to be maximum pressure on the IOC not to allow Russia and Belarus in. As we've seen with the fencing there's the World Fencing Championships, I think, in Tbilisi in Georgia, just taken place. They allowed the Russians and Belarusians back in. Ukrainian fencer Yulia Bakatsova has defeated a Russian fencer, Sofia Velikaya, who also is a major in the Russian army, at a tournament in Tbilisi. Velikaya was a trusted person of Putin in the 2024 elections in Russia and has been on the Ukrainian sanctions list for her connections with the Russian army. Despite that, International Fencing Federation allowed Velikaya and 40 other Russian and Belarus athletes to participate in the World Championship with a neutral status. Ukrainian Fencing Federation has issued a protest regarding those athletes. So good news there, excellent stuff. And it's good to see happy, smiling Ukrainians, isn't it? So they've had some success there. In fact, they've had 2 medals there. And the Georgian protesters were doing a good job outside. There were flares, there were protests, really good to see. I think there was a letter from a number of the competitors there against the inclusion of the Russian and Belarusian athletes. So Ukraine wins 2 medals at the Fencing World Championships in Tbilisi as protests erupt over Russian and Belarusian participation, held at the hotel housing and Russian fencers, the protests, and outside the hotel housing the Russian fencers, and outside the Sports Palace, which is a venue for the competition. So good news there. So that's enough from me today. Please remember the campaign that we're running for Jigaspor and Drone Lab to support Bogdan and, in this case, the eventual users, the 47th Brigade. Bogdan and Drone Labs are providing drones that are very much needed by these people. And there is an awesome raffle going on. So every 20 euros, I think it is, gets you a raffle ticket. And that you have a chance of winning one of 3 prizes: a downed Russian drone, a goodie bag with patches and signed flags and whatnot, I think, and then a piece of contemporary artwork on riffing on a traditional artistic theme, and that looks really cool from Lviv. So all 3 prizes are pretty funky there. Please get involved and support this amazing campaign and help Jigaspor out. Appreciate that. Take care. Speak soon.